My alarm clock goes off at 4:30 a.m., that obnoxious beeping sound that signals the start of another day. Most people would hit snooze, maybe even chuck the damn thing across the room. Me? I'm already out of bed, pulling on my worn-out jeans and faded t-shirt, ready to tackle the day. See, I'm not your average Joe with a 9 to 5 and weekends off. Nope, I'm Tom, the master of the side hustle. I juggle 3 jobs: construction worker by day, pizza delivery guy by night, and freelance writer on the weekends. Yeah, I know, weird combo. It's a grind, no doubt. My body aches, my sleep schedule is a mess, and my social life is practically non-existent. But hey, a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do, right? Especially when you've got a wife to support. Rosa, my Rosa. She's the reason I do it all. With her fiery red hair, infectious laugh, and a heart of gold, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. We live in a tiny apartment, the kind where you can practically touch both walls at the same time. Our furniture is mostly hand-me-downs, our car is older than I am, and our idea of a fancy night out is ramen noodles and a movie on Netflix. We're not exactly rolling in dough, but we make it work. And honestly, I'm content. Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy. 3 jobs, barely any sleep, living paycheck to paycheck. Who in their right mind would be content with that? But when I come home at night, exhausted but exhilarated, and see Rosa's smiling face, it all melts away. We have this thing, a connection. We can talk for hours about nothing and everything, laugh until our sides hurt, and just be. In each other's presence, the world outside fades away, and all that matters is us. It's not about the money, the fancy stuff, the keeping up with the Joneses crap. It's about love. Pure, simple, unwavering love. The kind that makes you forget about your aching muscles and your empty wallet. The kind that makes you feel like you can conquer anything, even if it's just another mountain of dirty dishes or a stack of unpaid bills. So yeah, life's a grind. But with Rosa by my side, it's a grind I'm willing to endure. Because at the end of the day, when the pizza's delivered, the construction site is quiet, and the words are flowing onto the page, I know I have something far more valuable than money. I have love. And that, my friends, is worth more than all the riches in the world. It was a Wednesday, I think. Or maybe a Thursday. Honestly, the days were all blurring together back then. I came home from my construction gig, exhausted but eager to see Rosa. I had a goofy little sunflower I'd picked up from the corner store, her favorite. And I was planning on whipping up my famous spaghetti carbonara. Famous in our tiny apartment, anyway. But when I walked in, the apartment was empty, eerily silent. No Rosa, no aroma of her favorite vanilla candle, just a cold, unsettling stillness. My heart did a weird little flutter. Maybe she was at the grocery store or visiting her sister. But then I saw it. The note, sitting on the kitchen counter, a single sheet of paper with her familiar loopy handwriting. "Tom?" it started, and just seeing her name written in her hand made my chest ache. "I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. I need a better life. A life you can't give me. I'm sorry, Rosa." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Leaving? Better life? What the hell did that even mean? Was this some kind of sick joke? A twisted prank show where they jump out and yell, "Surprise!" and Rosa's laughing, her eyes sparkling with mischief. But no. The apartment was still silent, the note still mocking me with its finality. No laughter, no Rosa, just a gaping hole where my heart used to be. I sank into a chair, the sunflower slipping from my grasp, its cheerful yellow petals a cruel mockery of the emptiness inside me. I reread the note, each word a dagger twisting in my gut. Can't do this anymore. Better life? I'm sorry. Sorry. Was that supposed to make it okay? To erase the years we'd spent together, the laughter, the love, the shared dreams? Dreams of a bigger apartment, maybe a little house with a garden, a family. Dreams that now seemed as distant and unattainable as the stars. The confusion was overwhelming. What had I done wrong? Was it the money, the long hours, the lack of fancy dinners and exotic vacations? I'd given her everything I had, my time, my energy, my love. Wasn't that enough? The question swirled in my head, a tornado of doubt and despair. I wanted to scream, to cry, to punch a hole in the wall. But all I could do was sit there, numb with shock, the note clutched in my hand, the sunflower lying forgotten on the floor, its petals wilting like my hopes and dreams. Rosa, my Rosa, was gone, and I was left with nothing but a crushing sense of loss and a heart that felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. It's amazing how much pain a single Facebook post can inflict. There I was, mindlessly scrolling through my feed, trying to distract myself from the gaping Rosa-shaped hole in my life, when it popped up. A picture. Rosa beaming, her arm linked with some dude in a ridiculously expensive suit, a smug grin plastered across his face. The caption, "Dinner with my amazing boyfriend, Dr. Mark. Life is good. Hash blessed hash new beginnings hash living my best life." Seriously? Dr. Mark? Living her best life? Was this some kind of sick joke the universe was playing on me? Like, hey Tom, remember that wife you loved? The one who left you because you weren't rich enough? Well, guess what? She's now dating a guy who could buy and sell you 10 times over. How's that for a kick in the teeth? The anger was immediate, a burning rage that coursed through my veins. But the anger was quickly overshadowed by a wave of humiliation. She had traded me in for a goddamn doctor. A guy with a fancy car, a big house, and a bank account that probably had more zeros than my phone number. It was like I was being mocked, ridiculed, not just by Rosa, but by the whole damn universe. And as if that wasn't enough, the universe decided to throw another punch. The next day, I got called into my boss's office at the construction site. "Tom," he said, his voice grim, "we've got to let you go. Budget cuts, you know how it is." Budget cuts my ass. I was the hardest worker there, always the first one on site, the last one to leave. But hey, who cares about loyalty and dedication when you can save a few bucks, right? So there I was, officially down to 2 jobs. 2 jobs, a mountain of bills, and a heart that felt like it had been put through a shredder. The world was closing in on me, the walls of my tiny apartment seeming to shrink with each passing day. I was drowning, suffocating under the weight of it all. The loss of Rosa, the betrayal, the financial strain. It was all too much. I wanted to give up, to crawl into bed and never come out. But something inside me, some stubborn, defiant spark, refused to let me go down without a fight. I had to keep going. For myself, for my sanity, for the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. Because even in the darkest of times, there's always a glimmer of light, a chance for redemption, a possibility for a new beginning. I just had to find it. "Dude, you look like hell," Mike said, sliding into the booth across from me at our usual Greasy Spoon diner. "Seriously, have you even slept?" I shrugged, pushing the congealed remains of my eggs around my plate. "Sleep is for people with one job," I mumbled, trying to force a smile. Mike, bless his soul, was the only one who knew the full extent of my misery. He'd listened patiently to my rants about Rosa, my woes about losing the construction gig, and my general despair about the state of the world. He was a good friend, even if his advice usually involved questionable amounts of beer and even more questionable dating apps. "Look, man," he said, his voice serious for once. "I know things are rough, but you gotta do something. You can't just wallow." "Easy for you to say," I grumbled. "You've got that cushy IT job and a girlfriend who actually likes you." He rolled his eyes. "Okay, first of all, my job is not cushy, and secondly, I'm just trying to help." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Speaking of helping, I heard about this gig. Might be right up your alley." "Oh yeah?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "What, another pizza delivery joint? Because my back can only handle so many potholes." "Nope," he said, grinning. "This is different. It's a caregiver position. For this old guy, loaded with cash. Needs someone to, like, drive him around, run errands, keep him company. Pays really well, too." A caregiver? Me? I'd never even taken care of a goldfish, let alone a human being. The idea was weird. But then again, so was delivering pizzas at 3 a.m. while trying to write a novel about a talking cat. And the pays really well part was definitely tempting. Tell me more, I said, curiosity piqued. Mike launched into a detailed description of the old guy, Mr. Fitzpatrick, his sprawling mansion, his eccentric habits, and his apparent loneliness. He's got no family, no friends, just a whole lot of money and a bad case of boredom, Mike explained. I hesitated. It all sounded a bit odd, but desperate times call for desperate measures, right? And besides, what did I have to lose? My pride? Ha, that ship had sailed with Rosa. All right, I said, a sense of reluctant determination settling in my gut. Set it up. I'll meet this Mr. Fitzpatrick. It wasn't the solution I'd envisioned for my life. But hey, sometimes fate throws you a curveball. And maybe, just maybe, this curveball would lead me somewhere interesting. Fitzpatrick's mansion was like something out of a movie. A sprawling estate with manicured lawns, a fountain that probably cost more than my car, and enough marble to build a small Roman bathhouse. I stood at the massive oak door, feeling a bit like Alice about to tumble down the rabbit hole. A stern-faced butler, who looked like he'd been carved out of mahogany, ushered me into a dimly lit study. And there he was, Mr. Fitzpatrick, sitting in a leather armchair that probably cost more than my entire apartment. A book in his lap, a frown etched on his weathered face. He looked old, really old, like he'd witnessed the invention of fire and the fall of the Roman Empire. But there was a spark in his eyes, a hint of mischief that belied his age. "You Tom?" he rasped, his voice a gravelly baritone that sounded like it had been marinated in whiskey and cigars. "That's me," I said, trying to sound confident, which, knowing me, probably came off as a nervous squeak. He peered at me over his spectacles, his eyes sharp and assessing. "You don't look like much," he grumbled. "But Mike said you were reliable?" "I try to be," I mumbled, shifting uncomfortably under his scrutiny. "Good," he said, nodding curtly. "Sit down. Let's get this over with." I perched on the edge of a plush velvet sofa, feeling a bit like a stray cat who'd wandered into a palace. Fitzpatrick launched into a list of his requirements. Driving him to appointments, running errands, managing his medication, the usual caregiver stuff. But then he paused, his gaze softening. "And," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "someone to talk to, someone who'll actually listen." That caught me off guard. This wasn't just about physical care. It was about companionship, about connection. And suddenly, I understood. This man, surrounded by wealth and luxury, was utterly alone. "I can do that," I said, meeting his gaze. "I'm a good listener." He studied me for a moment, then a flicker of a smile crossed his lips. "Good," he said, nodding. "You're hired." And that was it. No background checks, no references, no lengthy interviews. Just a simple conversation, a shared understanding, and a spark of connection between two lonely souls. As I spent the next few days settling into my new role, I learned more about Fitzpatrick. He'd been a ruthless businessman, a titan of industry, a man who'd built his empire from the ground up. But in his relentless pursuit of wealth, he'd sacrificed everything else: family, friends, love. "I was a fool," he confessed one evening, his voice filled with regret. "I thought money was the answer to everything, but it's not. It's just paper, worthless without someone to share it with." I listened, offering a comforting presence, a non-judgmental ear. And as I watched this hardened old man grapple with his regrets, I felt a surge of empathy. He wasn't just my employer. He was a cautionary tale, a reminder that there's more to life than money, that human connection is the true treasure. And as I settled into my new role, I realized that this wasn't just a job. It was an opportunity. An opportunity to learn, to grow, and to forge a connection with a man who, despite his wealth and his gruff exterior, was desperately in need of a friend. It's funny how quickly things can change. One minute I'm drowning in self-pity and overdue bills. The next, I'm cruising down the Pacific Coast Highway in a vintage convertible with a millionaire. Life, as they say, is full of surprises. Fitzpatrick, it turned out, wasn't just some grumpy old miser. Beneath the gruff exterior and the occasional Scrooge-like outburst, there was a witty, intelligent, and surprisingly vulnerable man. He had a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard, a sharp mind that could dissect current events with laser precision, and a surprising fondness for cheesy action movies. Who knew? We spent hours talking about everything and nothing. He told me stories about his younger days, his rise to wealth, his regrets, his lost loves. I listened, offering a sympathetic ear and the occasional witty retort. Hey, my comedic skills were improving. I learned about his passion for classic literature, his surprisingly encyclopedic knowledge of horse racing, and his secret love for baking. His chocolate chip cookies were legendary. He, in turn, learned about my writing aspirations, my love for Rosa. Yes, I still talked about her, sue me, and my questionable talent for karaoke. We were an odd pair, the young, struggling writer and the aging millionaire. But somehow, it worked. We found a rhythm, a comfortable companionship that filled the silence of the mansion and the emptiness in our lives. I wasn't just his caregiver anymore. I was his confidant, his friend, well, I guess you could say, his adopted grandson. And he, in his own gruff way, became the grandfather I never had. He started to come alive, his eyes regaining their sparkle, his laughter echoing through the once silent halls. He'd drag me along on his errands, not because he needed help, but because he wanted the company. We'd go to the grocery store, where he'd haggle with the cashier over the price of oranges, visit the library, where he'd engage in heated debates with the librarian about the merits of Hemingway versus Faulkner, and even attend the occasional bingo night at the local community center. He was surprisingly good at it. He started taking care of himself, too. He'd actually eat the healthy meals I prepared instead of ordering takeout, go for walks in the garden instead of spending hours in his study, and even started attending yoga classes. The sight of him attempting downward dog was something I'll never forget. It was like he was rediscovering the joy of living, the simple pleasures that he'd sacrificed in his pursuit of wealth. And I, in turn, was learning the value of human connection, the importance of companionship, the true meaning of family. It wasn't always smooth sailing, of course. He still had his grumpy moments, his stubborn streaks, and his occasional tendency to treat me like his personal assistant. But beneath it all, I knew he cared. He cared about me, about my well-being, about my future. "You're a good kid, Tom," he'd say, his voice gruff but affectionate. "Don't waste your life chasing money like I did. Find something you love, something that makes you happy, and don't let go of it." His words resonated with me, a reminder that I was on the right track, that I was building a life that was meaningful, a life that was filled with love, friendship, and purpose. And as I watched Fitzpatrick, his face softened by a genuine smile, his eyes twinkling with newfound joy, I knew that I wasn't just changing his life, he was changing mine. We were an unlikely pair, a found family forged in the twilight years of his life and the dawn of mine. But it was a family nonetheless, bound by a shared understanding, a mutual respect, and a growing affection that transcended the boundaries of age and circumstance. And in that unlikely bond, we found something far more valuable than wealth. We found each other. "Tom," Fitzpatrick announced one morning, his voice surprisingly strong despite the oxygen tank hissing softly beside him. "We're going on an adventure." I raised an eyebrow, a mug of lukewarm coffee halfway to my lips. "An adventure? What kind of adventure?" He grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye. "The kind with fast cars, loose women, and questionable life choices." Okay, maybe not the kind of adventure I was expecting from an octogenarian with a heart condition. But then again, Fitzpatrick was full of surprises. "Turns out," he continued, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper from his robe pocket, "I have a bucket list." He unfolded the paper, revealing a list scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Win big at the Kentucky Derby. See the Northern Lights. Visit a real old-fashioned strip club. He winked at me, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Go to a rock concert? A loud one. Drink tequila with a mariachi band in Mexico. I stared at the list, a mix of amusement and disbelief swirling within me. This is quite a list, I said, trying to keep a straight face. Damn right it is, he said, his voice filled with a newfound zest for life. And we're going to do it all, starting today. And so began the most surreal, exhilarating, and downright bizarre few months of my life. Our first stop was the Kentucky Derby, the air thick with the smell of freshly cut grass, horse sweat, and expensive perfume. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a wave of sound that washed over us as the horses thundered down the track, their hooves pounding the earth like a drumbeat. Fitzpatrick, with the confidence of a seasoned gambler, placed a hefty bet on a long-shot horse named Lucky Break, which, to everyone's surprise, actually won. He whooped with delight, a mischievous grin spreading across his face as he collected his winnings, a small fortune in cash that he promptly stuffed into his pockets. Next, we flew to Iceland, the landscape a stark contrast to the bustling racetrack. Here, the air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. We stood in awe beneath the dancing curtains of the northern lights, a celestial ballet of green and purple swirling across the night sky. Fitzpatrick's eyes were filled with wonder, his breath catching in his throat as he witnessed the magic of the aurora borealis. Our third adventure took us to Las Vegas, to a strip club that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Rat Pack era. The air was thick with the smell of cheap perfume, hairspray, and desperation. The music was loud and pulsating, the dancers moving with a practiced grace that was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Fitzpatrick, with a twinkle in his eye and a wad of cash in his hand, charmed the dancers with his surprisingly smooth moves and his even smoother compliments. He was in his element, a mischievous grin plastered on his face as he regaled them with stories of his younger days, his voice a gravelly baritone that echoed through the dimly lit club. I mostly just blushed and tried to avoid eye contact, feeling like a fish out of water in this den of iniquity. We moshed at a rock concert, the music vibrating through our bones, the energy of the crowd electrifying. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, beer, and something vaguely floral that I couldn't quite place. The lights flashed, strobing across the stage, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the rhythm of the music. The crowd surged around us, a sea of bodies moving in unison, their voices a roar that drowned out everything but the pounding drums and the screeching guitars. Fitzpatrick, surprisingly, was in his element, headbanging alongside teenagers and screaming along to lyrics he clearly didn't know, a mischievous grin plastered on his face as he reveled in the chaos and the energy of the crowd. And finally, we flew to Mexico, where we drank tequila with a mariachi band under a starlit sky. The air was warm and humid, carrying the scent of salt, spices, and blooming jasmine. The music was lively and infectious, the trumpets blaring, the guitars strumming, the voices singing in a language I didn't understand, but somehow felt deep in my soul. Fitzpatrick, his face flushed with tequila and laughter, belted out off-key renditions of Spanish love songs, his voice a gravelly baritone that echoed through the warm night air, blending with the music in a way that was both comical and heartwarming. It was a whirlwind of experiences, a kaleidoscope of sights, sounds, and sensations. Fitzpatrick, who had spent his life accumulating wealth, was now reveling in the richness of experiences, the joy of human connection, the simple pleasure of living in the moment. "This is what I missed, Tom," he confessed one evening as we sat on a beach in Mexico, the waves lapping at our feet. "This is what truly matters. The laughter, the adventure, the shared moments. Not the money, not the power, not the damn business deals." I nodded, understanding dawning on me. Fitzpatrick's journey wasn't just about ticking off items on a bucket list. It was about rediscovering the essence of life, the beauty of human connection, the value of experiences over material possessions. And as I watched him, his face etched with a lifetime of experiences, his eyes twinkling with newfound joy, I realized that I was witnessing a transformation. The old, hardened businessman was fading away, replaced by a man who was finally embracing life, a man who was finally learning to live. And in that journey, in that shared adventure, I was learning too. I was learning about the fragility of life, the importance of seizing the moment, and the power of human connection to heal, to inspire, and to transform. It was a lesson I would carry with me long after Fitzpatrick was gone. A lesson that would shape my life, my choices, and my understanding of what truly matters. The hospital room was sterile, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and the hushed whispers of nurses. Fitzpatrick lay in the bed, his body frail, his breathing shallow. But his eyes, oh, his eyes were still full of that spark, that mischievous glint that had drawn me to him in the first place. "Tom," he rasped, his voice weak but clear. "Come closer." I leaned in, taking his hand, its skin papery and thin, but surprisingly warm. "I'm here, Fitzpatrick," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He squeezed my hand, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You know, Tom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "these past few months, they've been the best of my life." I blinked back tears, surprised by his words. "Fitzpatrick." No, listen," he insisted, his voice gaining strength. "Before you came along, I was empty, a shell of a man, surrounded by all this stuff, but with no one to share it with, no one who cared." He paused, his breath catching in his throat. I waited, holding his hand, offering a silent comfort. "You changed that, Tom," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "You brought laughter back into this old house. You showed me what it means to truly live, to experience, to connect, to feel." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a profound gratitude. "You gave me something money could never buy, Tom. You gave me family." I squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "I know I don't have much time left," he said, his voice growing weaker. "But I want you to know, I'm grateful. Grateful for your kindness, your patience, your friendship." He took a deep breath, his chest heaving with effort. "And," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I want you to have it all." "Have what?" I asked, confused. "Everything, Tom," he said, his voice gaining strength again. "The house, the money, the whole damn lot. It's yours." I stared at him, stunned. "Fitzpatrick, I can't." "Yes, you can," he insisted. "It's what I want. You deserve it, Tom. You've earned it, and I know you'll use it wisely." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a plea. "Promise me, Tom. Promise me you won't make the same mistakes I did. Promise me you'll prioritize love, family, happiness over all this stuff." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I promise, Fitzpatrick," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise." He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face. "Good," he whispered. "That's all I wanted to hear." He closed his eyes, his breathing growing shallower, his grip on my hand loosening. I sat there holding his hand, watching as the life slowly ebbed away from him. And as I sat there, in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and the silence of death, I realized that Fitzpatrick had given me something far more valuable than his fortune. He'd given me a second chance, a chance to live a life filled with purpose, with love, with the kind of happiness that money could never buy. He'd given me the gift of a new beginning, and I was determined to make the most of it. The doorbell rang, a jarring intrusion to the quiet contentment I'd found in my new life. I was in the library, surrounded by towering shelves of books I'd finally had time to start reading, a far cry from the cramped apartment and the endless grind of my old life. I almost didn't answer. These days, I was enjoying the peace and quiet, the lack of stress, the sheer luxury of being. But the bell rang again, insistent, and a flicker of curiosity, or maybe just a morbid sense of inevitability, made me walk to the door. And there she was, Rosa. She looked different. Gone was the confident swagger, the designer clothes, the air of self-assured superiority. She was dressed in a simple, almost drab dress, her hair less vibrant, her face pale and drawn. She looked vulnerable, which frankly was a new look for her. "Tom," she said, her voice a tentative whisper. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, a mix of annoyance and a strange sense of detachment swirling within me. "About what, Rosa?" I asked, my voice flat. "About us," she said, her gaze dropping to the floor. "About everything," I sighed. "Look, Rosa," I said, "there's not much to talk about. You made your choice. You left." "I know," she said, her voice cracking. "And I made a mistake, a huge mistake." "You think?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "Please, Tom," she pleaded, her eyes welling up with tears. "Just hear me out." I considered it for a moment. What was the point? What could she possibly say that would change anything? But a part of me, maybe the part that still remembered the love I once felt for her, relented. "Fine," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." She walked into the house, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and something else. Greed? Maybe. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. We sat in the living room, a vast space that dwarfed my old apartment 100 times over. She looked around, her gaze lingering on the expensive furniture, the artwork on the walls, the grand piano in the corner. This is amazing, Tom," she said, her voice filled with a mix of admiration and envy. "You've done so well for yourself." "I have," I said, my voice even. "Thanks to a friend." "Fitzpatrick," she said, nodding. "I heard about everything, about the inheritance. It's incredible." "It is," I said, "but it's not the point, Rosa." "I know," she said, her voice trembling. I came back because I miss you, Tom. I miss us. I made a terrible mistake. Leaving you was the biggest regret of my life." "Really?" I said, my voice laced with skepticism. "Because last I recall, you were pretty happy with Dr. Mark and your best life." Her face fell. He dumped me," she mumbled. "It didn't work out." "No kidding," I said. "So now that your amazing boyfriend is out of the picture, you come crawling back to me because I have money." "No," she protested, her eyes widening in feigned innocence. "That's not true. I realized I made a mistake. I was selfish. I was blinded by everything. I didn't appreciate what we had." "What we had?" I scoffed. "We had a cramped apartment, a mountain of debt, and a wife who couldn't stand to be poor. That's what we had, Rosa." "Please, Tom," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Give me another chance. I've learned my lesson. I'll never leave you again. We can have everything we ever dreamed of. A big house, a family, a life of luxury." "A life of luxury?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you're after, Rosa? A life of luxury?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. I just want to be happy, Tom," she said, her voice barely audible. "Happy?" I said, my voice hardening. "You think money will make you happy, Rosa? You think a big house and fancy cars will fill the void inside you? You left me because I couldn't give you that. And now, because I have it, you think you can just waltz back into my life and pick up where you left off?" "It's not like that, Tom," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it is, Rosa," I said, my voice firm. "It's exactly like that. You left me because I wasn't good enough for you. And now, because I have money, you think I am. But you're wrong. I'm not the same man you left behind. I've learned a lot, Rosa, about life, about love, about what truly matters, and you're not a part of that equation anymore. Rosa's carefully constructed facade crumbled. The tears dried up, replaced by a flicker of anger, a flash of the old Rosa, the one who always got what she wanted. "You think you're so much better than me now, don't you?" She spat, her voice laced with resentment. "Just because you have some money." "It's not about the money, Rosa," I said, my voice calm but firm. It was weird. I wasn't even angry, not really, just disappointed. Like finding out your favorite ice cream is actually made of sawdust. It's about, well, it's about a lot of things. It's about respect, loyalty, being there for each other when things get tough. "I was there for you," she protested, her voice rising. "I supported you. I encouraged you." "You encouraged me to get a second job," I countered, "so you could buy that designer handbag you wanted. You supported me by complaining about our tiny apartment and how we couldn't afford to go on fancy vacations like your friends." "That's not fair, Tom," she said, her voice softening again, a hint of manipulation creeping back in. "I was just frustrated. We were struggling. I didn't know how to cope." "So you coped by leaving?" I said, the memory of that note, the emptiness of the apartment still a dull ache in my chest. "By trading me in for a guy with a bigger bank account?" "He wasn't just a guy with money, Tom," she said, her voice pleading. "He was successful. He understood my ambitions, my dreams." "And what about my dreams, Rosa?" I asked, my voice rising. "What about our dreams? The ones we shared, the ones you walked away from?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I was wrong," she mumbled. "I realize that now. I was foolish, selfish." "You were," I agreed, my voice flat. "And you know what, Rosa? That's okay. People make mistakes. We learn, we grow, we move on." "But I want to move on with you, Tom," she said, her eyes searching mine, desperate for a flicker of hope. "I want another chance. We can be happy, Tom. Truly happy. We can have everything we ever wanted." I shook my head. "No, Rosa," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "We can't. Because what I want now, it's different. It's not about the things, the money, the having it all. It's about connection. About finding someone who sees me, the real me, not the guy with the potential to make a lot of money." I paused, remembering Fitzpatrick's words, his regrets, his newfound appreciation for the simple things. It's about finding someone who will be there through thick and thin. Someone who values love and loyalty over luxury and status. Someone who wouldn't have left when things got tough, who wouldn't have traded me in for a newer model with a shinier paint job. Rosa flinched, her face paling. I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant, Rosa," I interrupted, my voice firm. "And that's okay. You were who you were, but I've changed, I've grown, and I need something different." I stood up, a newfound sense of confidence filling me. "I appreciate you coming here, Rosa," I said, my voice softer now. "But it's time for us both to move on. I wish you well, I truly do. But you don't have a place in my life anymore." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret, anger, and something that looked a lot like fear. The fear of being alone, of facing the consequences of her choices, of realizing that she'd traded genuine connection for fleeting material gain. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just sat there, defeated, the mask of vulnerability finally slipping away, revealing the harsh reality of her situation. I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there in the vast emptiness of the mansion that could have been ours. As I walked, I felt a sense of closure, a finality to a chapter that had been closed long ago. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet acceptance of the past and a hopeful anticipation of the future. I had learned a valuable lesson from Fitzpatrick, a lesson that transcended wealth and material possessions. It was a lesson about the true meaning of happiness, the importance of human connection, and the power of choosing love over everything else. And as I walked towards my new life, a life filled with possibilities and promise, I knew that I was finally free. Free from the shackles of the past, free from the weight of regret, free to create a future that was truly my own.